The Government of India has given clearance for the purchase of 83 Tejas Mark 1A aircraft. Of these, 73 are one-pilot fighter aircraft and 10 are tandem two-seat trainers as these are called. So roughly you can imagine that this is about 5 squadron strength of frontline fighter aircraft, single engine fighter aircraft. That's very good news and we will talk about that, and we will also look at IAF's experiences, adventures and some misadventures with fighter aircraft, particularly indigenously designed aircraft, because Tejas, mind you, is only the second indigenously designed and built fighter aircraft in India's history of 70 plus years. This is the fourth or the fifth, depending on how you calculate, fourth or the fifth largest air force in the world, which unfortunately has now been depleting in strength, and that is what this Tejas is supposed to fill up. So before we go there, I will do two things. First of all, I will show you this aircraft model. As you can see, this is a fighter plane, and I don't think, unless you are really a genius aviation nerd, you can figure out for me what this plane is, because the one hint I will give you is you haven't seen a copy of this overflying Indian skies, at least not in the last 30 plus years. Maybe some might have come at some point, I don't know. Now this is also, as you can see, this model is in the Indian Air Force livery, very much. This is Indian Air Force, right? But this model never joined Indian Air Force. So I will tell you a story about this, and if honestly, don't cheat, if honestly any of you can tell me before you come to the end of this Kartak letter what this aircraft is, I will send you a personal gift hamper. That's a promise. So do try. And the reason I'm showing this to you is that thereby hangs a tale. Now with this, I'll put it away so you can't read the name of the aircraft, and I'll put it away. So that done. Second thing, look at the print. I know that our subscribers are rising, our followers are rising, our engagement is rising. Every day, even for Kartak letter, I get more than 1,000 plus, sometimes going into 2,000 responses. National interest, it goes up to 3,000-4,000. A lot of our other products get 3, 4, 5, 6, 700, and these are by very young people who are half in age, in years, the number of years I've been a journalist. So they are very young people, and I know that you are liking the work that they do. Now, if you look at the situation right now, for a small, young organization like ours, we have Neelam Pandey and Praveen Jain traveling through Madhya Pradesh. So they are looking at what is happening in Madhya Pradesh with the communal tensions, also in Bhopal with the Covaxin tests. There is a controversy, the action or the arrest of the comedian in Indore, and many other things. These two people, marvelous people, have been traveling through Madhya Pradesh in a car. Similarly, we have Samyak Pandey and Urchita Bhardwaj, two more young journalists traveling through Punjab, looking at reporting the farm distress or farm protest story from the ground. You will also see an interview that they have done with 90 plus years old S.S. Johal, India's foremost agricultural economist. At the same time, we've had Ananya Bhardwaj and Praveen Jain just finished traveling to UP to follow these cases of the so-called love jihad arrests. And we've had Simran Sarur also going to Uttar Pradesh, Manisha Mandal, Shravasti. These are all very young people. They are traveling across the country and they are bringing you stories which I know that you like in text and video. But you know what? It costs money. It costs money, and we do not work on donations. We do not work on donations. We do not ask you to donate money to us. Some of you ask, should I donate or should I not donate, or why should I donate? You are not donating money to us. We are not asking for donations. As I keep saying, we are not appealing to your sense of philanthropy. We are appealing to your sense of self-respect. If you consume the journalism you like, you should be willing to pay for it. If you like an ice cream, you pay for it. If you like a soap, you pay for it. If you like a newspaper, you pay for it. If you like a magazine, you pay for it. If you like a TV channel and OTT platform, you pay for it. So when you like a kind of journalism or a journalism platform, you should pay for it. It is in your own interest, because remember that old truism, when you don't pay the price for a product, then you are the product. So we are not bringing you propaganda. We are also not bringing you something that a foundation is telling us that, look, if you do this story, we will pay you this money. That's donation. We are not seeking donations. You can support foundation funded organizations seeking donations also, by all means, more the merrier, but we are not seeking donations. We are once again appealing to your sense of pride and self-respect. Having said that, let me come back to what involves India's pride. That is Tejas. Now, Tejas is an aircraft. It's had a checkered history. Now, fighter aircraft are very complicated machines. Also, the problem with fighter aircraft is, by the time you get it close to or anywhere close to what the buyer may have wanted or the user may have wanted, technology in the world leapfrogs. In fact, even today you worry that the fighter aircraft that will be made in the next 5-7 years, will they last their normal life cycle of 30 to 40 years? Because by that time, who knows, unmanned vehicles, new drones, faster, better, longer range drones will replace them. So technology always leaps ahead of fighter aircraft development. Actually, technology leaps ahead of all machinery development, but fighter aircraft in particular have a challenge. Now, Indian Air Force has definitely about 20 of Tejas aircraft, Tejas Mark 1, not 1A, Mark 1. They are aircraft that got the IOC or Initial Operational Clearance. Then there's a bunch of aircraft, the number of which I can't tell you because Air Force would not yet disclose to us. That is the aircraft which have got final operational clearance. So IOC and FOC. Now these aircraft will keep coming in, and there will be 20 more of these, that is FOC. So 20 plus 20, 40, plus there will be trainers. So I suspect before the Mark 1A start coming in 2023 or sometime, or 24, by that time Indian Air Force will have about 3 squadrons of Tejas aircraft with Mark 1 with IOC and FOC. What that would mean is, one, that these would have replaced really obsolete aircraft or squadrons which had actually been what is described as number plated, which means the aircraft those squadrons were flying were obsolete now. So those squadrons, we don't say squadron has been shut down, just as you go to a shopkeeper, and I am sure there are equivalents in different parts of the country, but in North India, if you go to a Hindi speaking or Punjabi speaking shopkeeper, they never say I am shutting down my shop for the day. कभी नहीं बोलते मैं दुकान बंद कर रहा हूँ. They say मैं दुकान बढ़ा रहा हूँ, which in English would mean I am expanding my shop, because it is supposed to be inauspicious to say I am shutting down a shop. So you never shut down an aircraft squadron or an army battalion. You number plate it, which means you say this number exists, one day I will revive it. So 2 number plated squadrons accordingly have come alive now with this IOC and FOC aircraft. These 2 are very interesting squadrons, and you know I cannot help storytelling, so I'll tell you a little bit of it. So the first squadron to get the new Mark 1 Tejas, the first ones was 45th Squadron, also called Flying Daggers. Now 45th has a very adventurous history. In 1965 wars, it was still flying the old Vampires, right? That boxy fighter aircraft. And when the Pakistani pressure in Cham became too much, the only aircraft available in that region, particularly to go and bomb something at dusk, were the Vampires. So 4 Vampires were sent out to stop the Pakistanis. So they delayed the Pakistani assault, or the town of Akhnoor would have been lost. But in the process, this was a very old, this aircraft had just come up after Second World War and did not have an ejection seat. So these 4 aircraft ran into a melee of Pakistani fighters with air-to-air missiles, and unfortunately all 4 were shot down, 1 by ground fire, 3 by fighter aircraft. After that, Vampires were not used in combat, they were used for photo reconnaissance. But the squadron made sacrifices and also delayed Pakistan's assault, so that allowed India's reinforcements to fetch up, and that also allowed India to open up the other fronts in Punjab to take pressure off Cham and Kashmir. This squadron faced action on the very first day of the 1965 war. Later it graduated onto other aircraft which like most squadrons in the Air Force, was a variant of MiG-21. So MiG-21 FL first and Bison later. So 1971 war, this squadron was in Chandigarh, flew 258 sorties if I read the squadron history, with MiGs. And later, you might remember, this squadron made history. You might remember the incident when a Pakistan Navy Atlantique, a surveillance aircraft, which about 13, 14 people on board had strayed into Indian territory or had infiltrated or violated Indian airspace and was shot down by two MiG-21 BIS aircraft flying combat air patrol. Those aircraft were also from the same squadron, 45th Squadron. So that is 45th Flying Daggers. The next lot are now coming up, and these are FOC aircraft, full operational clearance. These aircraft are now joining the squadron called Flying Bullets, or 18th Squadron. Now 18th Squadron also has a very interesting history. In 71 war, 18th Squadron was based in Srinagar and flying Nats. In fact, it was from the 18th Squadron that combat air patrol of two pilots took off from Srinagar when four or maybe six Pakistani Sabres, four bombing and strafing and two as escorts. Six had come in to bomb Srinagar Air Base. So these two aircraft went up. So one of these two pilots who chased the Pakistani Sabres, shot down one, chased another one, damaged another one, and basically pushed them away from Srinagar and saved his airbase, and unfortunately died in that combat. Was then Flying Officer Nirmaljeet Singh Sekhon, who became the first and the only Paramveer Chakra winner of the Indian Air Force posthumously. So that is a legendary squadron as well. Now, just to give you a little bit of a timeline on Tejas, I told you early on that fighter aircraft take a long time coming of age. So 1983 was the first time when Government of India cleared a project to build a new light combat aircraft as a replacement for MiG-21s. Imagine, Indian Air Force or Government of India started the plan to replace MiG-21s as far back as 1983. Most of you were not born then. And yet, even today, we are flying 6 to 7 squadrons, depending on how you count them, of MiG-21s, and then many more of MiG-29s, which came later. So 83, this started. The first prototype flew in 2001. That took 18 years. Now, every country, no country can make everything by itself. Even if you look at many of the fighter aircraft that Europeans make, barring the French, because French do everything themselves because they are the French. But all the others then buy the engine from one place, fly-by-wire from another, radar from someplace else. So that is how you put together a complex weapon system like this, because an aircraft is not like building an aircraft, fighter aircraft is not like baking bread, that you put everything into a box and it will come out in the same shape. It doesn't work like that. It has many different parts. So initially, India thought they'll do too much themselves. And there was a reason why India thought that. The reason was that, remember, 1983, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These are years when India was still caught in a terrible environment of technology denial. That is after 1974, Pokhran in particular. In any case, the Western sources, particularly the Americans, would not give any quote-unquote sensitive technologies to India. It was so complicated that in late 80s, India had to fight a real battle to justify the import of a supercomputer to India. Why was that supercomputer needed? It was needed to predict monsoons for monsoon prospecting, because 87 India had among its worst droughts of all times. But the Americans were not giving it, saying that this is dual use, this is sensitive technology, you will be able to misuse it. Just as an aside, I will tell you that today your normal smartphone, say an iPhone 10, not even 11, will have more computing power than the supercomputer did then. But that besides, this gives you an idea of how difficult it was for India to function in that environment of technology denial. So India struggled for many years, but India had strength. India had strength in design. India had strength also in mathematics, brilliant, nothing worked without math. And India had strength in metallurgy. Metallurgy, making composite materials. and the head of DRDO at that point between 1982 and 92 for 10 full years. The head of DRDO was a man called Dr. V.S. Arunachalam. He now lives in Chennai, runs a very good NGO. I think he's 87, about 87 years old. But he became the DRDO chief in his 40s, a real young scientist. A lot of the others in the Indian establishment thought that he was an upstart, but he was not. He was a brilliant man. And he also had a sense of humor. So some of us used to pull his leg. So we used to say, oh, he's launched LCA. LCA will not see the light of day ever. So LCA should now be called Last Chance for Arunachalam. LCA, not Light Combat Aircraft, Last Chance of Arunachalam. He took it in his stride, and he did a lot of other stuff also, because he actually aimed very high at DRDO. He worked, by the way, in those 10 years, India had a lot of political instability. He worked with 5 prime ministers and 10 defense ministers. So 5 prime ministers, 10 defense ministers, a man in his 40s. Then he went to Carnegie Mellon to do research there. Now his specialization was metallurgy, and so India had that inherent ability in composite materials, design, math, etc., etc. What India did not know how to make was some complex electronics and definitely the engine. So the project that India had to develop the engine, Kaveri engine, that did not work, that failed. But the strength in metallurgy, in fact, when Dr. Arunachalam was there, he had also taken some of us to demonstrate the initial designs or initial models of MBT Arjun, which still is struggling. But one thing that nobody complains about as far as Arjun is concerned is the composite armor it has got, or what is called as Kanchan armor. So that armor is also owed to Dr. Arunachalam. So India, as times changed, now once again India came under an even tougher technology denial after the Pokhran blasts of 1998. But after that, as things opened up, and finally as the technology denial ended almost completely with the Indo-US nuclear deal, that is the reason people like us were supporting the nuclear deal, that this is not about nuclear energy. This is about getting out of scientific apartheid, not even nuclear apartheid, but scientific apartheid. Now, all this is made it possible for Tejas then to come up, because Tejas has an American engine. Tejas has a GE engine, top of the line engine, and there are now more advanced models coming up. So it has an American engine, it has an Israeli radar, ELTA radar, it also has British Aerospace, avionics and other systems. So this is about 50% indigenous today, which should not be a shame at all, because no country, as I told you, makes a complex fighter aircraft system all by itself. Not even the French, even the Rafale we are getting from French, we have got them to put some Israeli stuff in it. So to that extent, don't feel defensive that it's only 50% Indian made. That is good enough. Now, I will give you the rest of the timeline. 2001, the first prototype flew. That's when, as I told you, the technology denial regime has begun to ease after the Jaswant Singh Talbot talks. Then 2013 December, the first Tejas got initial operational clearance. July 2016, the first squadron, that is the Flying Daggers, 45th Squadron, it began to come up in Sulur in the south, not far from Coimbatore. That's a big training base as well. In Feb 2019, the first FOC aircraft also was given to Indian Air Force, and the second squadron began coming up. That is the 18th Squadron, also in Sulur, the Flying Bullets. By January 2021, by this month, 20 aircraft have been inducted definitely. Maybe there is a couple more, and a couple more are on the way. Currently, HAL, and you will see a couple of pictures that I will share with you on the Air Force Day of 2018. I had the good fortune or privilege of visiting HAL to record 2 episodes of my show Walk the Talk for NDTV. First was these 2 brilliant scientists who were effectively running what is called as Aeronautical Development Agency. This is a research agency which develops India's frontline aircraft. Now, the two scientists, you will see the picture, and I will also share a link of that walk the talk with you. In fact, I will share a link of both walk the talks with you, are C.D. Balaji, who was then Director of Aeronautical Development Agency, Director of the entire agency, but also Head of the Fighter Aircraft Program, and also Professor Girish Deodhare, who was also a senior scientist there working on these programs. So, not only had they designed the Tejas and its variants, but they were also working at that point, and you will see that picture also of that model of AMCA, which is Advanced Multi-Role Combat Aircraft, which has stealth features, etc., which is a generation 5 aircraft. We don't know when that will come up, but that work was also going on. So, by the time Tejas Mark 1A comes up, this will not exactly be the light combat aircraft. This will not be the Sasta, Sundar or Tikau replacement for MiG-21s. This will be an aircraft of a higher generation and higher capabilities and a higher weight as well. And as you can see, Indian Air Force has its own old love affair with delta-winged aircraft. So, you had MiG-21s, then you had the Mirage 2000s, and now Tejas also follows the same delta-wing configuration. So, that is something that they are used to. Now, if we look at these aircraft, the Mark 1A will be an improvement over Mark 1 in 4 key areas, and for that you see the details in a story by Snehesh Alex Philip, our defense editor, which I am sharing with you. Number 1, this will now be fully capable of mid-air refueling. Number 2, this will have an AESA radar, AESA. What is AESA? Active Electronic Scanned Array. That is the top of the line technology for radars these days for fighter planes. It can track 16 targets at the same time, etc., etc. That will make it better than much better than the JF-17, for example, which is a China-Pakistan joint production. Also, it will have an overall enhanced combat capability. It will also have an advanced electronic warfare package, and it will also have capability for longer range beyond visual range missiles. So, some BVR missiles like Derby, the Israeli missile, has now been fitted on Tejas Mark 1, but when 1A comes, then say Astra Mark 1, which is an indigenously developed longer range beyond visual range missile, that could be fitted on this aircraft as well. Now, I told you that I will tell you some stories about adventures and misadventures of the Indian Air Force with fighter aircraft, especially domestically developed fighter aircraft. So, India bought its first jets after independence, some from France, that is Oregon. In fact, Indian Air Force has always flown a Dassault aircraft. So, Oregon, which was called Tufani in India by Nehru, that was the first jet fighters. Also, Vampires were bought from Britain. Britain owed India a bunch of money as a former colony. So, in exchange for that, Britain was willing to give India some weapon systems. So, those were the first 2 jets came. But by mid-50s, as trouble with Pakistan increased and Pakistan came under the American umbrella, at that time Nehru and his government worried that India needed more advanced aircraft. So, one thing they did was that from the British they again used their credits, the pre-independence credits with the British pound sterling credits to buy B-57 equivalent Canberra bombers. Those served until about 15 years ago. In fact, one of those aircraft on a photo reconnaissance mission took a missile hit during the Kargil war because it was going low to take pictures with its advanced cameras of Pakistani positions. It took a missile hit, but it was so sturdy, and 2 engine also, it was so sturdy that while it lost 1 engine, it was able to land back on 1 engine. So, Canberras came in, but Nehru and his government knew that they needed a more modern fighter. So, 1955, what did they do? They went around the world searching for aircraft designers because India did not have that depth at that point. So, India's dream of building a fighter aircraft at home goes back to that period. Now, who do they find? It's a fascinating story. There was a man called Dr. Kurt Tank. As the name indicates, Dr. Kurt Tank was a German. He was a German aircraft designer. In the Second World War, he worked for a company called Focke-Wulf, FW, and he designed an aircraft called FW-190, which was the most used single-seat fighter of Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, in the Second World War. 20,000 copies, or in fact more than 20,000 copies of that aircraft were produced. Towards the end of the war, he developed a more advanced model of that aircraft, and by that time the German system was following the idea of naming and numbering their new aircraft models after their designers. So the improved version of FW-190 was now called TA for tank, TA-152. Now the war ended and Kurt Tank and his team at Focke-Wulf didn't know what to do. So they were looking for jobs, and they were not Nazis, they were technical people, so they were available. So the British said no to them. They negotiated also with Taiwan, or what was then called nationalist China. That did not work out. So they signed a contract with Argentina, and they went to work in Argentina and set up a design bureau. But that only lasted as long as Argentina's ruler lasted, that is Juan Perón. So Perón lost power in 1955, and Kurt Tank was at loose end, and Nehru reached out to him through his people and brought him to India. So he was brought to India to start building India's designing first jet fighter aircraft, and thereby started the HF-24 Maruth program. Now, one little sidelight, when Kurt Tank came, where would you put a professor like that of aircraft design? So he was made director. You could do these things those days without somebody challenging this in the High Court or the Supreme Court. So he was made director of Madras Institute of Technology, and he built a crack team of aircraft rocket designers. That team included one favorite student of his who became a national celebrity and icon, and I know you've guessed his name by now. He then went on to lead India's satellite launch vehicle program, and then the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, IGMDP, obviously Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. So he also came out of Kurt Tank's team. So Kurt Tank's team designed this aircraft, which was named Maruth, the speed of wind. It was meant to be supersonic, but could never break the speed of sound. Maximum it could do was 0.93 Mach. That's a little less than the speed of sound, because its engine was very inadequate. And the reason the engine was inadequate was that nobody would sell India a good engine, because even the MiGs to India began coming only by 1964. So nobody would sell India an engine. So what did India do? Because India had meanwhile bought the NAT from the British, which the British had rejected, the fallen NAT. India also set up a plant to make engines for the NAT, the Orpheus engine as it was called. So India started fitting two Orpheus engines into one model, one copy of HF-24 Maruth. So HF-24, which was meant to be a supersonic aircraft, now had two engines which were both subsonic. So it always remained subsonic and always remained underpowered. About 147 of these were produced. Fine, it fought in 1971. It fought in a ground support role. In fact, in the famous Battle of Longevala, besides the Hunters, HF-24 Maruths were also used. It showed a very strong survivability, because it had one special trait, that if its electronic systems failed, because it was hit by fire, it could be flown fully manually. So this aircraft performed, but never reached its true potential because the engines were not there. The technology was poor, and this was the era of technology denial. Sure enough, by 1975, this program was suspended. This aircraft was laid off, sold as scrap, and when it was sold as scrap, a lot of the aircraft had not even done 100 hours of flying. So that was an adventure, story of an adventure and a misadventure. So that is the problem, challenge that's always been there with the Tejas, because Indian Air Force is also bitten by the HF-24 experience. So they don't want to be stuck with 10 squadrons of an aircraft which is not good enough just because it is indigenously made. I think this Tejas breaks that voodoo. Now this also addresses the other problem that Indian Air Force has had, always living by jugaad. Now an Air Force should not live by jugaad. And I'll give you one example of jugaad, and then I will close this. That is, there was an aircraft called Fairchild Packet. That was the lifeline of Ladakh, Nepal, now Arunachal Pradesh, etc., etc. It could go high altitude, land at very short landing grounds. In fact, in old days, it could even land at the dirt strip at Daulat Beg only. Now that aircraft was found to be underpowered for those high Himalayas. So even if it went up there, it had too little power, could carry too little load. This was made by de Havilland. So what did Indian Air Force and its engineers do? And I will share an article with you from Bharat Rakshak. And within an article, you will see another article by Group Captain Jacob Chaco, who was an engineer in the IAF, who tells you this fascinating story. See the picture of this aircraft. It's a Fairchild Packet. How many engines does it have? It has 3 engines. But look closely. 2 of its engines are propeller engines. In fact, they were piston engines, not even turboprop engines. They were so old. They were piston engines. But because it was underpowered, on top of that aircraft, they put a jet engine. So they put a jet pack on top of the aircraft like this. And that jet pack was nothing else but an Orpheus engine that HAL was making for the NAT. So that's the kind of jugaad that Indian Air Force has lived with. Hopefully now technology denial is over. India's own depth in science and technology is much deeper, and that will not happen. So it's a good beginning. Now I'd shown you a model to begin with. I'll show this to you again. This is, I'm giving the story away. This is an F-20 Tiger Shark. This is an aircraft that Northrop, the American company, designed in mid-80s and tried to sell to many countries like a poor man's or a third world F-16, like an improved F-5. F-5G was then a very popular aircraft. And they said, they made a presentation to Pakistan Air Force that if you bought this, this will devastate the Indian Air Force. And they made a presentation to Indian Air Force saying that if you buy this, this will devastate the Pakistani Air Force. So in 1987, I was working on a book on global arms trade under Steve Cohen's, Professor Steve Cohen's guidance, and he sent me to meet this person at Northrop who had tried to sell this aircraft to both countries. And I found in his office models of F-20 Tiger Shark in Indian Air Force livery and Pakistan Air Force livery. So when they went to Pakistan, they gave those away as gifts. They came to India, they gave these away as gifts. So he let me take this one with Indian Air Force livery with me, and I've kept it with me. And the reason I'm sharing this with you today is that when a country with a large air force or large armed forces does not make its own armaments, then you get caught in this kind of situation when another country's company can make the same weapon system and try and plug it to both adversaries. So that is truly a third world existence which India is now breaking.